For the last 352 days, a North Carolina man has been living under the control of terrorists. Keith Siegel, 65 years old, among the 100 hostages still being held by Hamas. He and his wife Aviva were taken from their homes in their pajamas on October 7th, 2023. Aviva was released a month later. I spoke to her. Aviva Siegel, thank you so much for speaking with us here on WRAL. We know you are in Washington, D.C. as we speak. We talked about the deplorable conditions she endured. They didn't have enough water. They weren't allowed to stand up straight. She says they felt like they didn't have enough oxygen. Aviva doesn't know if Keith is alive or dead tonight. All she knows is she will keep fighting for him and all the other hostages until they're released. The U.S. government has been working with numerous countries to try to get a ceasefire deal so that the hostages can be released. That hasn't happened yet. What do you want to hear from the American government?
I want to hear that the deal that's on the table will come true and that Keith will come home with all the hostages. There's 101 hostages left in Gaza, and they need to come back. So that's what I want to hear. But I do know that the Hamas is responsible, taking Keith and I with our pajamas from our house and kidnapping us in a very brutal way. And it's their responsibility to bring Keith back home.
I want to go back to that time, October 7th, and as well, your time in captivity and the day in November when you were told that you're being released, but your husband, Keith, is not. That must have been excruciating, Aviva.
Yes, to say goodbye to Keith, I didn't know if I'll ever see Keith again. And I didn't know if they're going to kill me or they're going to kill Keith. I just did not know. I was scared, but I was scared all the time. I was threatened there that I would be killed all the time. And death was always above my head, thinking, when am I going to die? If I'm going to die first, if I'm going to see Keith dead.
Oh. Can you describe the conditions the hostages are in and were in when you were one of the hostages?
I nearly died underneath the ground. One of the times they took us underneath the ground, it was 40 meters underneath the ground, and Keith and I were sure that we're going to die. All we did is lay down on the floor, on a filthy, dirty mattress, and tried to breathe. And Keith looked at me and he said that he feels that he does not have any oxygen. He was like, and I was like that too. And I just told Keith, just lie down and try and breathe. And everything in our mind just went that we're going to die soon.
Aviva also talked about Israeli-American Hirsch Goldberg Poland, a hostage whose body was recovered earlier this month. He was among those taken from the Nova Music Festival on October 7th. Israeli officials say Hamas militants shot him dead at close range. Tonight, Hamas has around 100 people still held hostage. Israeli officials believe about a third of them are dead.
Hirsch was American and he was killed in such a brutal way. We've gotten so close to Hirsch's family, to Rachel and John, and it just broke my heart what they did to Hirsch. And I'm scared all the time that something similar will happen to Keith. The conditions there were so bad. We used to starve while they ate in front of us, and they didn't give us any water to drink. We weren't allowed to move our body. We weren't allowed to stand, and we had to lay down most of the time. And the only human right that we had, if we lie on our stomach or on our side, because everything was taken away, we had to say all the time that everything's okay. In Arabic, we had to pick up tamam and say tamam. Tamam is okay, while nothing was okay there. I was scared, I was threatened, and one of the worst things for me was to see Keith. To see Keith, the way they treated him in such a brutal way. He shouldn't have gone through something like that. He's 65 years old. He's the most gentle, sweet person in earth, and we behaved all the time. I used to ask myself, how come they behave to us like they do while we're behaving? But we were threatened all the time.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is committed to winning this war. This week, he said he's considering forcing all Palestinians from northern Gaza in order to lay siege to Hamas. Meantime, Israel has carried out a new wave of airstrikes targeting Hezbollah in Lebanon. More than 500 people have died. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has been digging his heels in. What will it take for him to relent and get the hostages home?
I'm not a politician, and I'm not dealing with politics. I'm just Keith's wife that wants Keith home, and I want him home now, and I want him home alive. And I'm just praying that Bibi will be strong enough to bring him home. But I do know that Hamas needs to take responsibility for everything they're doing to the hostages, because what they're doing is the worst thing ever.
Do you believe they're also responsible for what's happening to Palestinians? I mean, there's so much suffering going on. I want to understand what it's like for you to cope with being both a victim of and a witness to so much suffering.
Yes, I say that Keith and I are peacemakers, and we just want people to enjoy life. Everybody gets one chance in this world to live. And when I think about Palestinians, women in Gaza having babies in tents, it breaks my heart. And to see them and hear that they're suffering and that nobody in the world is even looking on what's happening there. And we can't let the evil win in this world.
Aviva Siegel, I wish you and Keith all the very best. Thank you for taking the time.
I just want to tell everybody that Keith's mom is 97 years old, and he's waiting to come home and give her a hug, and she's waiting for him. And I pray every day that Keith will come home and he'll be able to come home to North Carolina to hug his mom. Thank you very much.
Dan, Aviva tells me that she believes a ceasefire deal is the only way to bring the hostages home. It's a tough interview to watch. That was part one of our segment on this war in Gaza this week as we approach the first anniversary of October 7th, 2023.